Death Wish from 1974 stars Charles Bronson. It's directed by Michael Winner and is about Paul Kersey, who is an architect who lives in a New York apartment with his wife. He also has a grown daughter and son-in-law, and he seems to have a happy life until three muggers, one played by Jeff Goldblum in one of his first roles, follow his wife and daughter home. They kill his wife and rape his daughter, which begins to tear him apart mentally. He goes to Tucson, Arizona for a job to try and get his mind off what happened, and there he is given the idea of buying a gun and using it in self-defense. He then goes back to New York and becomes known as the Vigilante, walking the streets at night trying to draw out an attack so that he has an excuse to kill any mugger he finds. So this is actually an impromptu review for me of the original Death Wish. I wasn't even planning on doing this, but then I watched the original again the other day in preparation for the remake, which I am going to review, and I was like, oh god, I just have to review this. I have to talk about this film because this is actually a really good cult film I personally really like. At the time of its release, Death Wish was a controversial film amongst critics, many of them including Roger Ebert, even though he actually liked the film in the end, gave it 3 out of 4 rating, which is a positive review from him. He did say that the message of this film is scary because it promotes vigilantism and, you know, carry a gun around and if someone attacks you, shoot them and all that nonsense. And I agree, that is a scary idea, and yes, I can see why, I can definitely see that in this film. This did do really well at the box office, and it has become this cult classic in recent years, and it made Charles Bronson a star at the time. So it is actually worth talking about. I can see why they're remaking it. Eli Roth's doing it, which I'll get more into that later, but that at least makes some sense as far as bringing back the grittiness of the original movie. He probably will, I assume, although I don't really see it in the trailers, but I've seen Eli Roth's other films, so I don't really know. That could just be how they're promoting it to modern audiences. This film actually fits really well in with the times, though. You had these really gritty, raw movies, a lot of them involving revenge. Movies like Straw Dogs and Last House on the Left. Later on, you had The Hills Have Eyes. Taxi Driver, one of the best. This sort of raw, visceral, gritty nature of these films was very common across the board. So Death Wish fits really well here, being about this guy who lost his wife and pretty much lost his daughter. She is alive at the end of the film, but she goes into a catatonic state throughout this whole film. Interestingly enough, Sidney Lumet was set to direct this film originally, but instead he decided to go on and direct Serpico instead. He's also known for directing movies like 12 Angry Men, Network, Dog Day Afternoon, and Murder on the Orient Express. And he's one of those really well-known directors. It's a shame he didn't end up directing this film. I would have loved to see a Sidney Lumet version of Death Wish. I'm sure it would have been closer to the book. Also, interestingly enough, Brian Garfield, the author of the novel that this film was based on, hates this movie because his book is really showing the consequences of a man who decides to go on a revenge spree after his wife and daughter are attacked. That would honestly be an interesting contrast to read the book and then watch this movie, just to see both sides of the coin of this debate of should people be able to conceal and carry or shouldn't they? What are the consequences that could possibly come about because of that? It would at least be interesting because I think it is worth discussing, especially nowadays when we have all this gun rights stuff going on, which is very important to be talking about. I can get into where I stand on this since this is that kind of movie, sorta. I'll get more into that later. But I do like seeing the other side of the coin where it's, you know, I guess I'll allude to it now. I like seeing the other side of the coin where it's saying, you know, yeah, you should conceal and carry. Because I don't believe you. I don't believe it's always worth it. However, I can see in the neighborhood like New York is portrayed in this film, and it was like this at the time, or so I'm told. I can at least see the merit of that, you know, having something to defend yourself, at least to take out when you're being attacked and say, do you want to screw with me? Are you sure? Keep walking. You know, like, to at least keep yourself and your family safe. But anyways, Michael Winner came about directing this film, and he directed Charles Bronson in a film previously called The Mechanic, and which actually just got a remake with Jason Statham recently, and a sequel. I've seen neither of those or the original. I'm going to have to see those at some point. And Charles Bronson, who mostly done bit parts, at least in American movies, stuff like The Great Escape and The Magnificent Seven. Once Upon a Time in the West he was in. but he really didn't have a major role. But this film made him really well known in America. One of the things I like about this movie is just how concise the script is. Within, like, the first 10 minutes, we know exactly who this guy is. We see he's happy. He has a loving wife. We see him go to work, and I do love it. Like, the first scene is them on vacation in Hawaii. Then he goes back to work in New York, and this guy walks up to him, and it's like this funny little bit part in the movie that he's kind of like the comic relief. I like this character because he just walks up to him and he goes, "Oh, hi, Paul. How was your vacation?" "The crime statistics have raised." Like, what? What conversation segue was that? Like, there's dialogue in this movie. I'll admit that it's a little heavy-handed, to say the least. But I do find that line funny, because it's just like, who does that? Who's like, "Hey, how's it going? How's your vacation?" "The murder rate has raised to an exponential height." Also, I do like how this sets up why Paul decides to do the things he does. First off, the use of rape in this movie, and in any movie really, is a very difficult subject, obviously, because it's one of the most disgusting things that humans do to other people that happens in our world, and it's vile, disgusting, and it needs to be shown in a way, if you're going to show it in a film, where it respects how disgusting it is, and I think this movie does it. This is one of the scenes that is not exploitative, and I think that's a better way to do it than other films in the 70s, like the infamous "I Spit on Your Grave," which I unfortunately sat through. Let's just say I fast-forwarded for about 40 minutes of it, because that's how long the rape scene is. Yeah, there's a way to do it, and then there's that movie, and that movie's exploitative about it, absolutely, and it's utterly disgusting and vile. This movie, at least, it respects the fact that this is so disgusting and vile, but the reason it's put in there is so we can see why Paul goes to the lengths to have vengeance on these muggers that he does. Same thing in Last House on the Left. It was appropriate to have that scene there, but it also doesn't go too long. I think that also helps. As we see him before, he's very sympathetic towards muggers even. He says stuff like, "Well, they're poor." Like, he kind of alludes to stuff. I guess he doesn't get too blunt, but he alludes to stuff like the sympathy for these people, that we just need to help them. He's a very liberal-leaning man. He doesn't believe in gun violence at all. He believes in the system, and we need to help these guys. We need to, help people to get jobs so that they don't have to attack people for money. So we needed that scene, I believe, because it changes this whole scenario of his thinking. Also, Jeff Goldblum's in the movie. I just want to mention that real quick because he's not going to come up again. Jeff Goldblum is one of the muggers in this movie. It's weird to see him in this movie. This is like one of his first movies, so that was kind of odd. And it's horrific because he's one of the muggers that does the deed, and yeah, that's horrific. But yes, Jeff Goldblum is in this movie, as I mentioned, for any Jeff Goldblum fans. And I just realized this was not intentional. I'm not even kidding. Okay, I'll leave this in, but that was not, I wasn't even thinking about it. Swear to God. But, I just noticed that. There's scenes of him looking outside his apartment window, and he sees these guys come along and break into a car, steal something out of it, and run away. And no one shows up, no one calls the cops or anything. Then he goes to Tucson, Arizona, where he meets this guy who he wants to build some sort of a mall. We don't know a lot about it. We don't really need to know a lot about it. We just know he's an architect, so he's going to help him do this. And he's laying the land, checking it out. And then he goes to a gun club with the guy. And they have an interesting little debate about, gun rights. And he says at the and this is in 1974, so it's a different time for New York, of course. But he makes the point that, well, they don't really have the amount of violence that in Tucson that they do in New York City. I like when they can bring points up in movies, even if it's something that I don't agree with, again, all that much. Although, I don't know, I'm 50-50, because I can see both sides. This is one of those issues, at least in this case of self-defense, I can see both sides. Now, where Paul Kersey takes it later, he takes it beyond self-defense, where he's trying to lure muggers out, like I mentioned in the plot summary, so that he can kill them. So that's definitely where the line is. But defending yourself from being attacked or raped or something, that's absolutely appropriate. Charles Bronson, while he's not an amazing actor, does sell this character, to me at least. He does sell this kind of stoic, grieving father who's just trying to hold himself together and keep going. And then the way he looks, and you can see a lot in his eyes as he sees muggers getting away with crime, and then he goes to Tucson and he sees a reenactment of an Old West show, like a shootout, standoff between cops and robbers. And you can see the wheels turning in his head just by his looks, and part of that's also the camera work here. And then later on, after the first mugger he kills, he goes home and throws up because he's disgusted with what he's just done. Even though part of him is feeling like he just did something good because he just defended himself and got rid of one less mugger that's going to attack someone else and harm and destroy someone else's family. So it's kind of interesting to see his deterioration or his change into this other guy as he's desensitized to the violence he's committing. I think they did that, honestly, really well. One of the things I would have liked to see in this movie is the flip of the coin, and this is where I will say this movie is a one-sided in the debate, which is why I would just say read the book also. The movie completely portrays it as he's doing the right thing. I would love to see a scene of, like, maybe he misunderstands the situation. He sees someone that looks like they're being raped or robbed or something, runs over. Turns out it's something innocent, but it's too late because he's already killed the mugger. That would have been fascinating. And then you have, like, whoever was being attacked go, "What the hell did you just do?" Like, he was just asking for directions or something. Like, he stereotypes some guy that looks like he could be a mugger. That would have been fascinating. But he never does. He always lures him out. He always makes sure he looks like he has money on him. Makes sure he's alone. So he waits till, like, they have a knife out and are in his face before he attacks. Which, to his credit, it's not like he's just attacking random people he sees that might look like muggers. And that's good. But maybe they could have had someone else do it. Because later on in the movie, they also show civilians aren't maybe taking guns out, but they are standing up for themselves. And maybe show that happen. Maybe someone comes up to someone, they think they're about to be mugged, and so they pull out a gun on them. And it turned out to just be some innocent guy. That would have been fascinating. But that's not the movie that says maybe the remake will do that. I don't know. I kind of doubt it. But hey, maybe we'll be lucky. Also, for the most part, I like how they portrayed the police in this movie. Because it shows they really can't do anything. Because a lot of these muggers are random attacks. They, a lot of times, don't even see their face because they'll come up behind. Like, there's one point early on when Paul Kersey's still trying to investigate this thing and still trying to give the cops the chance to actually find these guys. He goes to the police station, and you overhear this conversation where this woman's saying she was attacked, but she was attacked from behind. And the cop's like, well, did you see anything? Do you have any sort of description of this guy? And she says, no, he came up from behind. I already told you that. Do something. And it's like, well, he can't. Because you have no description of this guy. So this mugger, and this happens a lot in real life, and definitely did back then, these muggers got away with it because, you know, they didn't have enough descriptions. They were in the shadows. They were just random events. And that's why a lot of these people get away. Like I said, I don't promote vigilante violence. I don't promote people taking guns and just going around shooting people that they think might be criminals because so many things can go wrong with that. You could be so wrong. However, I do completely understand, especially in cities like 70s New York, when it was really that violent and dangerous to even walk across the street. I understand at least having something on you, maybe a knife or even a pistol, to defend yourself. It at least shows the other side of the debate in a way that makes sense, in a way that actually brings up points that are fair enough. Like, I can understand that. I like when a movie can do that. I like when a movie can show me a point of view that I maybe don't agree with, but at least can make it make sense. Sure, it's a B movie in the end, but it's elevated by Charles Bronson and by the politics of the film. It has a lot of great scenes in it that I didn't get a lot of time to talk about, but honestly, I love the gritty rawness of this movie. It's just my kind of movie also, I will admit. I do have a bit of bias for these kind of gritty, raw 70s movies. I love these kind of things, like Taxi Driver, of course, which is a much better movie, I will say. Taxi Driver is much better. This is still a pretty good movie, though, and I'm going to give it 4 stars. I'm happy I got a chance to review this movie. I didn't think I was going to until I rewatched it, but oh my gosh, was this worth talking about. I really like this movie. And I'll talk more about the remake when the remake comes out, obviously, this weekend. I'm kind of intrigued to see what they're going to do with it now that I've rewatched this original. But that's it for me on Death Wish. Check it out, especially if gritty, violent movies are your thing. Definitely check it out. And like, comment, subscribe. See ya.